Is it easier to work with them as individuals or as a couple?
Woof, you put two personality disorder patients in the room, it's hard. But I do this all the time, and it's hard, but it's so enriching because everything is so affectively alive that it's here in the moment. It's not intellectualized. Like sometimes it gets so intense, you have to tell them, you cannot speak to each other anymore. Everything comes through me right now. Okay. So you have to take some control because this work is challenging. And then if you let it spiral, and I hear this a lot with, couples who do come to me, that they've had other unsuccessful treatments, and then he gets up and storms out, or she's, shuts down. So you have to work really hard before it gets to that point. And sometimes it may even mean that they can't talk to one another until you get everybody into that more regulated state and we're actually talking and not just attacking. So yeah, it's quite challenging working with two of them at the same time, but very rewarding because now you have something that's alive in the room, and that's where you could really get something done. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Mazzella. In this episode, you're going to hear another clip from my interview with Deborah, the host of Healing from Toxic Abuse podcast. In this part of the conversation, we dive into one of the most confusing and painful dynamics in narcissistic relationships, gaslighting. Well, at least it's confusing to me, I should say, and that's what we begin to talk through. We talk about how gaslighting isn't always as clear-cut as people think. Sometimes it's deliberate, a way to control, confuse, or make someone dependent. But other times, it's less calculated and more of a reflection of someone living inside their own distorted reality, unable to see another truth beyond their own. From there, we explore what it actually looks like to work with, or even stay in a relationship with someone exhibiting narcissistic characteristics. I describe how to tell the difference between a moment of self-protection and true malignant intent, and how to respond when you're on the receiving end of devaluation. I also walk her through some practical steps for protecting yourself while staying grounded in reality. There's so much more in this part of our discussion, such as how sometimes you could begin to, and I'm quoting Deborah, sneak around the defenses of a narcissistic personality, creating space for something more authentic to emerge, not just in the relationship, but within yourself as well. Let me just get you right into it again. Here's the next clip from the interview. I hope you find it both thought-provoking and useful.
What role do you see gaslighting playing in destabilizing people that are around these? Like, how does that contribute to their sense of reality? How do you see that destroying them?
I'm really confused, to be honest with you. You may have to help me with this one a little bit, okay? This whole thing with gaslighting confuses me because, again, working with people who identify with these narcissistic characteristics, from my own experience, they do not ever intentionally, well, let me not say that, except for the malignant, which I said is an exception to the rule, where they do get their power through manipulation. That's the malignant narcissist. The majority of cases do not intentionally distort reality. They just live in a different reality than you do. So when they're sitting there and they're like, yes, I retreated to the room or I walked away, right? This is the person who's identifying with the narcissistic. They go into what we call a psychic retreat, which is they withdraw, right? But it's not done intentionally to manipulate your reality or to gaslight you. They just have a different experience of what just happened or what led them to pull away. So I have a little bit of problem with the gaslighting. I completely understand and agree with the concept when it comes to more of the malignant, because, oftentimes you could say to someone, well, you felt manipulated by this person. And saying that you felt manipulated is very different, because when you're with more of the malignant type of narcissist, it's very different than, no, you actually were manipulated. They did gaslight you. So I think it's a real thing, and one that has to be taken seriously. But I think to some extent it may be, I don't want to say overstated, because I think it might be overstated when people don't fully understand the extent to which people who identify with these narcissistic traits live in their own reality that's very different than your reality. And that's where most of the gaslighting comes in, I believe, when there's a big discrepancy between what happened, who has a claim on reality and the truth.
I mean, I can see where you're coming from on that because you're treating both, the people that are coming to you saying that they need help with their narcissistic traits, which I don't think are ever really the full blown malignant
Malignant,
narcissists.
yes.
Yeah. But which makes it even more confusing for people that are on the receiving end of it, because that is one of the hardest things to do is detect. And I hear this all the time is, did they mean to do this? Is their intention to, fill in the blank, whatever. Usually it's distort their reality, take their own sense of self away, make them confused, make them become dependent on them, make them so confused that they become dependent on them. And we do see that a lot, but that just leaves a question in anybody who's on, in a relationship with somebody like this about how do we know? How do we know if it's intentional or unintentional? So I'm curious about how you work with these people that have to stay in or want to stay in a relationship with somebody like this. Is that something that you help them sort through?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So as I was listening to it, I'll use a prototypical situation, in order to protect my practice, okay? So a patient tells me just recently that a colleague at work makes really cutting comments, like about what he wears, how he dresses, how he presents himself. Now, is that intentional? Most likely, yes, right? Now, the question is, what do you do, right? I think that's your question. Like if you're with somebody or you have somebody like this in your life, and we could put it aside just for a moment, whether it's intentional or not, but it still needs to be addressed because it hurts, right? So then the question becomes, how do you address something like this? And I recently recorded a podcast with a series of steps, which I won't go into detail now. I'll just give you a very high level. But the first step is trying to sort out, is this malignant intent? Is it malicious or is it defensive? Are they just trying to protect their self-esteem in this moment? And I hear this quite a bit, like on other podcasts that I listen to, where sometimes people begin to say, why did they say something like that to me? And if I could be more curious about it and start there at least and see if they have any insight into the way they just spoke to me. And then we could go from there. So the first step is, was it malignant? Because that will automatically cool you down. Because most times, like this patient told me that he wants to attack immediately. He wants to strangle this woman, right? And then when I slow him down, I say, well, let's think about it. What was her motive? Why do you think she said that? This is really important because it's not just having compassion for these people, which it is a little bit, but it helps you as well because it begins to create a little space where you can engage your mind, begin to think about, what was going through in them? Like, was it completely uncalled for? Were they threatened by something? Hey, this is really hard. I know most people don't want to do this, but did I say something inadvertently? Was there something I did? And it could be something as subtle as, I'm going out with my girlfriends Friday night, back to that example. They may have a wild reaction to that. So one level of intervention could be slowing down, and this is what we call mentalization in my field, developing a capacity to reflect not only on your own state of mind, but somebody else's state of mind. And this is really hard. I'm not trying to make this seem like it's easy, because now you might be triggered. Understandably, you just came under attack. So that would be step one. And step two, I'll skip around because I don't want to, like I said, take too much time. But inevitably what it leads to is if you're in your own regulated state enough that you could just say something like, I don't know if you realize, but that was a very hurtful comment. I don't know if you intended it to be that way. I'm just making this up, but you can see like you're checking in, you're labeling the behavior. And then you say, I don't even know if you realize this. So you're not attacking them. You're giving them some benefit of the doubt, but you're making it very clear that you're aware that they just attacked you. And you want to know, are they aware of it, right? And then you can imagine it. They'll say, what to that? Oh, you're just being sensitive. I don't know. It's just,
Perfect.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then again, that's something you really need to think about because I see this a lot where people are oversensitive. But if you're not being oversensitive and you really were attacked, again, like I said, this guy's just wearing his clothes. He just got a new outfit. And by the way, he just got a new outfit. He probably looked good. And she may have had some feelings about that. And I see this a lot with the people who have a covert narcissist in their life. They accomplish something or something that they feel proud of, and they have a covert narcissist in their life that cannot tolerate that. They make these passive aggressive comments, they put them down, but they do that for what reason? Because they feel envious or they feel jealous or they feel excluded. But anyway, I could keep going through the steps and specific things to say, but let me just pause because I don't want to go too far into it in case it's bringing up any questions or thoughts that you want to sort of pick up on.
let's take a quick break.
Are you tired of feeling like you're walking on eggshells all the time? Do you feel drained, confused, or like nothing you do is ever good enough? Are you stuck in a cycle of elation, then criticism and confusion? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And that's exactly why I created Office Hours with Dr. Anthony Mazzella. That's me. Office Hours is a low-cost, small group space where you could bring your questions about narcissistic traits and dynamics and the places where you feel stuck. You'll be met with honest, grounded feedback. I'll hold the group with structure, but there's also space for real conversation. This is a space designed for anyone looking for clarity, insight, and support. If that sounds like you, just click the link in the show notes to join us. Okay, I hope to see you there.
Yeah, it is bringing up a couple of thoughts, but all very good points. You know, when you directly say, and the way you do, you kind of disarm them and say, I don't know if you realize this or not. And then you're very direct about how it affected you. You know, to me, I feel like if they come back with you're just too sensitive or
Yes.
any attack on you, does that give you kind of more of an indication of their intentions or inability to have empathy or understand where you're coming from? Is that kind of a signal?
No, there's no doubt. That's another red flag. So thank you for adding that to the list. If they respond with you're too sensitive, they double down. Now they're attacking again, which absolutely demonstrates that they have very little capacity for reflection, right? They
Yeah.
have very little capacity to even hear and take you into consideration as a person separate from them with your own feelings. They have no regard for you. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay, and you're talking about the steps. So that's good. This is very good advice. So step one, pause, consider, which is really hard to do because that's going to drain you. That's going to take a lot of energy to have to sit there and sort through. Did they mean this? Didn't they mean this? Did I say something? Didn't I say something? The bottom line is they said something that hurt. We don't know
Yes.
if it was intentional or not.
Exactly.
So check in with them respectfully. I like that. Step two.
Yep.
What's step three if they come back with an attack?
So then it's like, if they're like, oh, you're just being sensitive, then I would probably say something like, well, I say this kind of joking, but you see, I got to get this out. But I wouldn't say this. How are you so sure that this is just about me? But I would figure out a nicer way to say that. What I'm trying to communicate is, yeah, I would probably say more like, yeah, you know what? You could be right. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive. I'll give that some thought. But however, did you notice the way that you said it, that it could be seen as an insult? When you said, I'm trying to think of another example because there are so many of these. A fellow's changing a light bulb or something in his place and he breaks it. And his wife immediately is like, you're so clumsy, and you broke it. And he's like, no, it was an accident. No, it wasn't just an accident because you're rushing and your head isn't in the game. Get your head in the game. I know. You see, I'm just making this up, but you could see then the reflection would be, okay, so maybe I am clumsy. And I may even say this to them, you know what, maybe I am a little clumsy, or you may be onto something that I was rushing, but I'm wondering why the need to speak to me in that way and start calling me names. That's at least what I would be thinking to myself. And at some point, if you're not angry and you really want to engage somebody, if you think there's any positive prognostic indicator that maybe sometimes they are open to hearing you and sometimes they can have a conversation, you may want to ask them, yeah, maybe I am clumsy, but why the need to present it that way? Why the need to harp on me like that? I don't
Bringing it.
understand. Can you explain that part to me?
That's good. Making them face the truth a little bit more. I almost feel like there needs to be two different treatments. One for the person in a relationship with a malignant narcissist, which is you're never going to get anywhere. And then one that's, dealing with the narcissistic traits or just the less severe. So
Wait,
you
let me
ha-
just add one thing to that,
Yeah,
Deborah,
yeah.
because you are absolutely right. I would just add one thing. There are 20 different treatments for each of those because there are so many little nuances that, we're just putting like these big clusters like malignant or, covert. When you get close to these people or these dynamics in relationships, they are so nuanced that you need to have a whole bunch of tools in your toolkit, to address these things. But overall, you are right. Because if you're dealing with somebody who's with a malignant narcissist, your way of helping them is going to be different because then it's more about what? Creating boundaries, trying to get back your own power, right? Because, you know, they take away everything from you because they render you powerless, right? Helpless. So that's going to be very different than if you're dealing with somebody overall who's with somebody who may be more of a passive or dependent or clingy or covert type of narcissist. So that's, yes, an astute observation. So thanks for that.
And I love that you're putting names with this too, because it's really helping to clear it up. And, you know, because there's been so much mystery around it. Like if it's all just one thing, if it's all just narcissism,
Yes.
it's really
Yes.
hard to sort through that. It's exhausting to try to think, do they mean to do this on purpose? You know, so yeah, of course, there's going to be a lot of different treatments.
And sometimes they actually do mean to do it on purpose. And then that's a different intervention. You need a different strategy. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So yeah, what are your strategies? Your practice is psychodynamic treatment, right? And
Yes.
insight-oriented healing. What does that look like?
Okay. I mean, you and I are talking about it already. Remember, I just mentioned a moment ago, there are so many little subtleties. We're just sort of clustering things. But the problem is, and you said it very nicely, everyone says like narcissism, it kind of gets this blanket, you know, sort of thrown over it. It's like it bites off more than it can chew. So in my practice, I think what distinguishes me, you know, from what I hear, at least from the patients that come to me who've been through many treatments, is we slow things down. We open up space. We try to understand nuances that go on so that if I'm treating someone who identifies with being, you know, with the narcissistic traits and they do blow up, let's say more of that blow up type of narcissist, we don't want to just say, oh, you blew up. It's like, wait a minute, slow down. Let's go over this again. Tell me what was happening, what preceded that. And slowly we begin to unpack what led this fellow to blow up. Not that we're excusing the behavior. We're not making excuses for it, but we're trying to help him gain some space, the capacity for mentalization, self-reflection. We call this an observing ego. That leads to impulse control. In essence, this is the way once you get to know yourself, like I'm just making this up hypothetically, he didn't notice this before, but he felt slighted because his wife did this or his partner or something happened, but that goes under the radar. So the main point of my line of intervention or the type of work I do is we don't look at stuff at the manifest level. We look at what's going on underneath that. We look at the latent stuff. So things that are so subtle, you may not notice them until we slow down. And then we realize how hurt he felt, but he could not articulate that he felt hurt, you know, that his wife was going out with her girlfriends or something like that. Instead, what we see is the rage and the fight. And then we focus on the smoke screen instead, you know, so that's one of the main things that I think differentiates my approach, the more psychodynamic approach based on a psychoanalytic model, which is looking at not just what's cognitive, like intellectually on the manifest level, but what goes on unconsciously all the time.
It sounds like you're trying to target the schemas or the beliefs that are driving the protective system. So if his wife goes out with the girls or whatever and he blows up, but he makes it into something else, you know, just to cause this smoke screen and distraction, which happens a lot. The bottom line is that whatever his schema or self-belief that he's not even aware of might be, such as I'm being abandoned, you know, or I'm not loved, I'm unlovable, or something like that.
Yes.
So, and how do you get to that? You give him some space, you give him or her, whoever you're working with. So you give them some space and you slow it down. That's good. And then there's the protective part that kind of seems to want to come up and defend against. Give me a little bit more detail about how you break through that.
Yeah. So I think what happens is once you slow things down and initially you express appreciation for something that's maladaptive. So this goes back to the dialysis patients. They're skipping treatment. They're in and out of the hospital, but I'm never there to tell them, hey, I think you need to, you know, cool it down or you need to get the treatment. Like I want to understand what led, you know, I want to talk about Atlantic City, you know, and the gambling. So once you get closer to their subjective experience, the defenses that you mentioned just a moment ago begin to come down. Why? Because they don't have to explain themselves. You know, they're not on the defense, in other words. They're being understood, maybe for the first time in their life, because everyone's always telling them what to do or not do, or they're getting in trouble for the way they behave. So anyway, the first step is always then getting as close as possible to their subjective experience and then validating that. That typically right there helps them get into a more regulated state of mind. The defenses come down, and that's when the work begins. But it starts with validating, like, yeah, listen, now, you know, and I'll say to them, now that we're going over this, I can understand why you yelled at your wife. It doesn't seem like you're so crazy. And they think that they're crazy too, if they're not too busy blaming their wife, right? But validating them, or, and again, it's not agreeing or condoning it, but it's just trying to understand from their perspective why they behaved in such an irrational, wild, crazy way. And then the defenses come down, and now things are slowing down. And that's when we can begin, what we call the work. Not that it's all work, by the way. This is a lot of work, just slowing them down.
Right.
This is all part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. You're kind of sneaking in. You're sneaking around the defense. It's like I'm visualizing this big wall, this big wall with alligators and a moat out front and everything else. And then you're like just trying to find a way past that. So you can be like, hey, we're just trying to reach you, Yeah,
and I get it. I understand why you behaved in this way. I get it. Again, not condoning it, but I understand it. Now that wall starts to come down a little bit, and now we're working. And then once we're working, we begin to confront. Confrontation is a part of therapy. I don't mean in an angry, aggressive way, but we have to confront their reality because their reality is so distorted. So when you said your wife went out with her friends, right? Is it possible that she just wanted to have time to connect with her girlfriends and it wasn't just about her doing something to you? You see what I mean? Like now that's a confrontation. Right. Because he interpreted it as, look what she's doing to me. She's leaving me home again with the kids. Again, I'm just making this up, but you see how persecuted they could feel so quickly. But that has to be confronted. So that's like the next level down. This is all still part of the work. But so there's the validation. Now we're confronting them, which they don't like. But you do it in a way when the guard is down, the wall, like you just described, is down. They're more open. You have to feel these things too. If they're not open to it and the defenses are still there, you're not going to confront in that way.
You're right. Yeah. Is it easier to work with them as individuals or as a couple?
Woo, you put two personality disorder patients in the room. It's hard, but I do this all the time, and it's hard, but it's so enriching because everything is so affectively alive that it's here in the moment. It's not intellectualized. Like sometimes it gets so intense, you have to tell them, you cannot speak to each other anymore. Everything comes through me right now. Okay. So you have to take some control because this work is challenging. And then if you let it spiral, and I hear this a lot with, couples who do come to me that they've had other unsuccessful treatments and then he gets up and storms out or she's, shuts down. So you have to work really hard before it gets to that point. And sometimes it may even mean that they can't talk to one another until you get everybody into that more regulated state and we're actually talking and not just attacking. So yeah, it's quite challenging working with two of them at the same time, but very rewarding because now you have something that's alive in the room and that's where you can really get something done.
That's so fantastic that you can do this. I mean, just thank you for all your work that you are doing with this because not everybody can do that. It's a lot of work.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope this conversation gave you some new ways to think about the complex dynamics that play out in narcissistic relationships. If you have any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear from you. Your reflections always help shape these discussions. If this spoke to you and you're curious to learn more about all issues related to narcissism, please support the show by subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. And even more importantly, take a moment to leave a review. Reviews make the podcast easier for others to find, which helps the show grow. The more the show grows, the more I can invest in creating thoughtful content that supports you in understanding and navigating your experiences with narcissism. Okay, thanks for being here with me. I'm grateful we got to explore this one together. Until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now. Disclaimer alert. The Narcissism Decoder podcast is provided for general information purposes only. The content presented in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any psychological condition related to narcissism. The content on this podcast should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. For specific advice pertaining to narcissism or any other psychological condition, you could reach me directly. I am an experienced mental health practitioner who is always taking on new patients. If you would just like a consultation, I can do that too.